Step into the darkness with witness shadows. Every shadow has a witness, and every witness has a story they've been too afraid to tell. Welcome to Witness Shadows, your ultimate destination for true horror stories and disturbing stories that linger long after the screen goes black. Whether you're looking for scary stories to sleep to, or chilling stalking stories that make you double-check your locks, our collection of true stories is curated to haunt your subconscious. The pram outside my house was empty until it started crying. This happened in November, the year all that rain came down over the North York moors and never seemed to stop. I'd only been in the cottage on Bracken Lane for 4 nights, and already I hated how quiet it was there after dark. In the daytime, it looked almost cozy in that sad, northern sort of way. Stone walls darkened by damp, a little front garden with a bent iron gate, chimney leaning slightly as if the whole place was tired of standing. But once evening came and the light went out of the sky, the lane turned into something else. There were only 4 houses on it, and mine was the last one before the fields gave way to rough ground and the black line of the moor. Opposite stood the old vicarage, boarded up and rotting, with a collapsed greenhouse and a front garden that had gone wild years ago. Even in daylight, I didn't much care for looking at it. At night, with rain dragging down the windows and the branches knocking together in the dark, it looked like the sort of place you'd cross the road to avoid without really knowing why. I'd ended up there because my flat in Leeds had flooded, and the agency I worked for arranged the cottage cheap through a landlord they knew. I'm a community carer, so at the time I was doing long shifts between scattered villages, getting in and out of the car in all weather, smiling at people, making tea, sorting medication, trying to sound cheerful even when I was knackered. By the time I got back each night, I was too tired to do anything except heat something and sit with the telly on for company. I honestly thought that was what those few weeks would be. Miserable weather, long drives, and a damp little place to sleep in until my flat was sorted. Nothing dramatic. Nothing strange. The first few nights were uncomfortable, but in a normal way. The pipes clanged. The wind got under the eaves and made a thin, whining sound above the bedroom. The back gate clicked if the gusts hit it from the fields. I kept telling myself the place just had old house noises, and I believed that right up until the Thursday night. That was the first time I heard the wheel. I'd got back later than usual because one of my clients had a fall, and I'd stayed until her daughter arrived. It was close to 9:30, pouring down and properly cold. Not that sharp, dry cold you can stand if you're wrapped up, but that soaking sort that gets into your sleeves and sits in your bones. I remember because I stood in the kitchen with my coat still on, rubbing my hands over the hob while the kettle boiled, looking out at the dark garden and thinking I'd never wanted a house to feel like home so badly in my life. The rain was hitting the glass hard enough to blur everything beyond it. The security light by the back step kept flashing on and off because of the weather, making the yard appear in jolts, wet flagstones, the washing line, the fence shining black. Then the light cut out again and I heard it. A squeak, faint at first, metal and rubber, like something with an old wheel being pushed very slowly over wet ground. I stood there listening with the kettle just beginning to rumble. It came again, squeak, then a pause, then squeak. Not random, not the gate, not a branch. Something with weight. I remember actually smiling to myself because I was trying that hard not to be stupid about it. I thought it might be Martin, the landlord, dragging a bin round the side, or maybe something from the farm further down the road had come loose. But it was too slow, too measured. It sounded close, then not close, then close again, as though whatever it belonged to was passing back and forth just outside the range of the window. I went to the sink and wiped a clear patch in the steamed-up glass with the side of my hand. At first, I couldn't see much beyond my own reflection in the rain. Then the security light flicked on. There was a woman in the lane. She was standing just beyond my gate, facing the cottage. She had no umbrella, no coat that I could make out, just something long and dark hanging from her shoulders, soaked flat against her. Her hair was plastered over most of her face. Beside her was an old pram. Not the modern sort. One of those high, old-fashioned ones with the hood up like you see in photographs. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there in the rain with both hands on the handle, looking straight towards the house. I went completely still. My first thought wasn't ghost or anything daft like that. My first thought was that someone needed help. Maybe her car had broken down. Maybe she'd gone wrong on the lane. Maybe there was a baby in that pram in weather that bad. But even then, something about it felt wrong enough that I didn't open the door. I called out through the glass instead, stupidly muffled by the kettle and the rain, "You all right there?" No answer. The security light died. For a second, all I had was my own reflection again and the shape of the kitchen behind me. Then lightning flashed somewhere over the moor and lit the lane white. There was no one there. I actually laughed once, under my breath, because that felt easier than admitting how hard my heart had just kicked. I stood there waiting for the light to come back on, telling myself she'd simply moved on, that I'd only caught a glimpse of someone passing in the rain and made it seem stranger than it was. But what I didn't expect was the sound starting again. Only this time it was closer. So close it seemed to be under the kitchen window itself. Squeak! I stepped back from the sink. Squeak! The kettle clicked off, and in the sudden quiet I realized I could hear something else too. Not crying exactly. More like the sound a very small child makes just before it starts, that broken little hitch in the breath. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. I just stared at the black square of the window while rain ran down it in crooked lines. Then the security light came on one last time. No woman, no pram, no one in the yard at all. But on the flagstones directly beneath the kitchen window, where there should have been nothing but rain, were two narrow tracks in the dirt, pressed deep and wet, as if something with old wheels had been rolled right up to the glass and left there waiting. That was the moment the cottage stopped feeling temporary and started feeling wrong. Not haunted, not yet, not in any word I would have used then. Just wrong in a way I couldn't explain. And the worst part was, after a minute or so, everything seemed fine again, like nothing would happen. The rain kept falling, the pipes knocked once in the wall, the house settled, and the whole lane went quiet. But I still locked the back door, then checked it twice, then pulled the kitchen blind all the way down before I made my tea. And while I stood there drinking it with both hands because they wouldn't stop trembling, I had the oddest thought. It wasn't that someone had come to the house. It was that someone had come to see if I was in. I didn't sleep properly after that. I lay in bed listening to every small noise the cottage made, trying to separate what was normal from what wasn't, the pipes ticking, the wind pressing itself along the walls, the occasional rattle of the loose pane in the spare room. All of that I could explain. What I couldn't explain was the silence in between, those long stretches where everything stopped at once, like the house was holding its breath. I kept thinking about the tracks under the window. At one point, sometime after midnight, I nearly got up to check them again, just to prove to myself they were already gone, washed away by the rain. But I didn't. I stayed exactly where I was, staring at the ceiling, because the idea of pulling that blind up again made my chest feel tight in a way I couldn't justify. I must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off, and the sky outside was that dull, heavy gray that never quite turns into proper daylight. I told myself it had just been one of those nights. New place, bad weather, too much in my head. By the time I left for work, I'd almost convinced myself it had been nothing. Almost. The tracks were gone. The flagstones were clean, except for rainwater and a few leaves plastered against the edges. No marks, no lines, nothing to prove what I'd seen had actually been there. That should have reassured me. It didn't. The whole day passed in that strange, distracted way where you're going through the motions, but your mind keeps slipping back to the same moment. I was making tea for Mrs. Cartwright, nodding along to whatever she was saying, and suddenly I'd see that woman again. Just standing there, not moving, not calling out, not asking for help. Just waiting. By the time my shift ended, the sky had already started to darken again. It was barely 5:30, but November doesn't give you much of a day, and the clouds were so thick it felt closer to night. I remember sitting in the car for a minute before getting out, watching the lane through the windscreen while the engine ticked as it cooled. Empty. Of course, it was empty. I told myself I was being ridiculous, grabbed my bag, and went inside. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Same damp smell, same quiet, same faint chill that seemed to cling to the place even with the heating on. I flicked the lights on in every room as I moved through, not because I was scared exactly, just because, well, it felt better that way. I made a point of going straight to the kitchen window. The yard was clear. No tracks, no pram, no one at the gate. See? I actually said it out loud like I was talking to someone. Nothing there. I laughed again, a bit louder this time, and it sounded forced even to me. I'd just started taking my coat off when I noticed something on the back step. At first, I thought it was just a clump of leaves blown up against the door. But when I opened it a crack and looked down, I saw it properly. It was a tiny knitted boot, pale blue, soaked through, the wool stretched and misshapen like it had been dragged through mud. It was sitting right in the center of the step, as if someone had placed it there carefully. I didn't pick it up straight away. I just stood there staring at it, trying to think of any normal explanation. A neighbor's child, something dropped, something blown in. But there were no other houses close enough for that to make sense, and the gate had still been latched when I came in. I leaned out and looked along the lane. Still empty. "Hello?" I called, louder this time. "Anyone there?" Nothing answered me but the wind pushing through the hedges. I don't know why, but I eventually crouched down and picked the boot up between two fingers. It was colder than it should have been, and heavier, like it had soaked up more than just rainwater. There was dirt ground into the stitches, dark and almost black. For a second, just a second, I had the stupid thought that it might be warm inside, like something had been wearing it. It wasn't, just cold, completely cold. I shut the door, locked it, and set the boot on the counter, like it was something I didn't quite trust to touch again. I told myself I'd mention it to Martin. He turned up about an hour later, completely out of the blue, saying he'd been in the area and thought he'd checked the boiler was coping with the weather. I remember thinking how convenient that was, but I was glad of the company all the same. I showed him the boot. He barely glanced at it. "Probably kids," he said, shrugging, already halfway into the utility room. "You get all sorts up here. They like to mess about, see if they can spook people." "There aren't any kids nearby," I said. He gave a small laugh. "Doesn't mean they don't wander." Something about the way he said it made me feel like he wasn't really listening. "It was right on the step," I added. "Not blown there. Placed." "Then someone's having a laugh," he said, still not looking at me. "Best thing you can do is ignore it." Ignore it? That didn't sit right with me at all, but I let it go. What else was I supposed to do? Argue with him about a single boot? He stayed for maybe 10 minutes, fiddled with the boiler, and then left as quickly as he'd arrived. I watched him drive away down the lane, his headlights swallowed by the bend, and the quiet rush back in behind him like it had been waiting. I made myself some food, kept the telly on, tried to settle. But every now and then, without thinking, I'd glance at the back door, at the handle, at the small square of darkness beyond the glass. I don't know how long I'd been sitting there when I heard it. 3 knocks, slow, even, polite, not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. The sound had come from the back door. I waited. Nothing. I set the fork down carefully and stood up, every movement feeling louder than it should have been. I walked over, step by step, telling myself it was probably Martin, come back for something, or maybe someone actually needing help this time. I leaned forward and looked through the glass. There was no one there. The yard was empty. The light hadn't come on, just darkness and the faint shimmer of rain. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Wind," I muttered. "Just the wind." I turned away. That's when I heard it again. 3 knocks. Not from the back door this time. From inside the house. I stopped dead. The sound had come from behind me, from the narrow pantry door just off the kitchen. A door I knew I had shut and latched earlier. For a second I couldn't move. All the explanations I'd been clinging to just fell away. Because wind doesn't knock from the inside. I slowly turned around. The pantry door was still closed. Still. But as I watched, the handle gave the slightest movement. A small, careful dip, like someone on the other side was testing it, gently, seeing if it would open. I didn't go near it. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring, feeling the air in the kitchen change, thicker somehow, colder, like the house itself was waiting to see what I would do. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself think the night before. Whatever had been out there wasn't just outside anymore. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that pantry door. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it felt longer, like everything had slowed down around me. The kitchen clock was still ticking on the wall, the rain still hitting the window, but it all sounded distant somehow, like I was underwater. The handle didn't move again. That almost made it worse. Because if it had kept going, if something had tried to force its way out, I think I would have reacted. I would have shouted or run or done something, but the fact it just stopped, like whatever was on the other side knew I was watching, knew I was waiting, that left me stuck. I forced myself to breathe. "In your head," I whispered. "It's just settling. Old door." Even as I said it, I didn't believe it, but I needed something, anything. I took one step back, then another. I didn't turn my back on it, I couldn't. I just edged away slowly until I reached the doorway into the hall. The pantry stayed shut. The handle stayed still. For a moment, everything seemed fine again. That was the worst part, that false normal, because it almost tricked me into thinking I'd imagined it. I stayed in the living room after that, with every light on, the television louder than it needed to be. I didn't go back into the kitchen, not even for my phone charger. I just sat there watching something I wasn't really paying attention to, trying to let the sound of voices fill the space. Every now and then, I'd glance toward the doorway. Nothing moved, nothing happened, and slowly, against my better judgment, my shoulders started to drop. The tension eased just enough for me to feel a bit stupid again. "See?" I muttered to myself. Nothing. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. That's exactly when it did. The power went out without warning. 1 second the room was full of light and noise, the next it was just gone. The television cut to black mid-sentence, the lamps died, and the cottage dropped into a thick, heavy darkness that felt almost physical. I swore under my breath and fumbled for my phone. The screen lit up, too bright in the dark, and for a second I just stood there, letting my eyes adjust, telling myself it was just the storm. Of course it was. The whole area had probably gone out. "Great," I said quietly, more to hear a voice than anything else. I turned the torch on and swept it across the room, sofa, table, doorway, everything where it should be. I felt ridiculous again. "Right," I muttered. "Fuse box." I stepped into the hallway, the beam of light shaking slightly in my hand despite how much I tried to steady it. The house looked different in the dark, narrower somehow, the walls closer, the corners deeper. I moved slowly, checking each space as I passed it. Bathroom, empty. Stairs, clear. The kitchen doorway. I hesitated there. The pantry door was still closed. I told myself I had to go in. The fuse box was in the utility room just beyond. I couldn't just stand there all night because I was spooked by a door. "Get a grip," I said under my breath. I stepped into the kitchen. The beam of light slid across the counter, the sink, the back door, and then I saw it. Not directly, in the reflection. The television screen in the living room, now black and glossy, caught the edge of the torchlight from where I stood in the kitchen doorway. And in that reflection, just for a second, I saw someone standing behind me. At the bottom of the stairs, tall, thin, completely still. My body reacted before my mind did. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my footing, the torch jerking wildly as the beam bounced off the walls and ceiling. There was no one there, just the empty hallway. The stairs rising up into darkness. Nothing, nothing. I stood there, breathing too fast, my ears ringing with the sudden rush of blood. "You didn't see that," I said, voice shaking despite my best effort. "You'd have stopped." It's because something else had changed. The air, it felt colder, not like a draught, not like the kind of cold you get when a door's been left open. This was sharper, thinner, like stepping into a place that hadn't been lived in for years. I turned slowly back toward the kitchen. The torchlight fell across the wall beside the doorway, and that's when I saw the handprint. It was about shoulder height, pressed flat against the plaster. At first glance, it just looked like a smear of water, but as I stepped closer, I saw the shape of it properly. A hand, but wrong. The palm was too narrow, the fingers too long. Not stretched, just formed that way. as if whoever or whatever had made it didn't quite understand how a hand should look. I felt my stomach drop. "Okay," I whispered, barely able to get the word out. "Okay, that's not—" I didn't finish, because the water on the wall wasn't clear. It was darker, mixed with something. Ash. It left faint gray streaks trailing down toward the skirting board, like whatever had touched the wall had come from somewhere burned. I took a step back, then another. My mind was racing, trying to pull together anything that made sense. A prank. Someone had gotten in. Someone was in the house. That had to be it. It had to be something human, something real, something I could deal with. But I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't heard footsteps. And I knew, absolutely knew, that I hadn't been alone when I saw that reflection. I backed into the living room without taking my eyes off the hallway. My hands were shaking now, properly shaking. I grabbed my phone, nearly dropping it as I fumbled to unlock it, and called Callum. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Han, you all right? It's late." "There's someone in the house." I didn't recognize my own voice when I said it. Too thin, too tight. "What?" He sounded more awake instantly. "What do you mean, have you called the police?" "I don't know," I said, eyes fixed on the hallway. I saw someone, and there's something on the wall and the door." "Slow down," he said, firm now. "Lock yourself in a room. Now. Do it now." "I can't," I whispered. "Why not?" Because I couldn't stop looking at the hallway. Because I felt like if I turned away even for a second, something would be there again, watching, waiting. And then before I could say anything else, there was a sound, soft, close. Behind me, I turned. The television screen was still dark, still reflective, and this time I didn't need the torchlight to see it. The figure was closer now, standing just inside the room, right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just stared at its reflection, my whole body locked in place, my breath caught somewhere in my chest. It wasn't moving, but I knew it was looking at me. And slowly, very slowly, it lifted its head, as if it had just realized I could see it too. I don't remember turning around. I remember deciding to. I remember thinking, you have to look, you have to know what's behind you. But the actual movement, how I went from staring at that reflection to facing the room, it's just gone. 1 second it was there. The next, it wasn't. The space behind me was empty again. Just the sofa, the table, the edge of the rug slightly curled where I'd caught it earlier with my foot. Nothing standing there. Nothing watching. Nothing that should have made sense of what I'd just seen. "Callum," I said, and my voice sounded strange, flat, like it belonged to someone else. "It's gone." "Gone?" he repeated. "What do you mean gone?" "I don't know," I said, and that was the worst part. I don't know what it was in the first place. There was a pause on the line, then the sound of him moving, keys, I think, maybe grabbing a coat. "I'm coming over." "No," I started instinctively. I didn't want him driving out in that weather, not down that lane, not with how it felt outside. But the word came out weak, and I didn't have anything solid to back it up. No proof, no explanation. "I'm coming," he said again, firmer this time. "Stay where you are. Keep the phone on." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Okay." I didn't move from the living room. I couldn't bring myself to. The kitchen felt wrong now. The hallway worse. The stairs. God! I couldn't even look at them properly without that image flashing back into my head. That shape at the bottom. The way it had lifted its head. So I stayed exactly where I was, sitting on the edge of the sofa, the phone pressed to my ear, the torch lying on the table but angled so it still threw a weak light into the doorway. Every now and then, Callum would say something. Ask if I was still there. Tell me he was on the road, that he'd be 10 minutes, maybe less. I answered him, but I wasn't really listening. I was listening to the house, waiting for something else to happen, waiting for that feeling to come back. And the strange thing is, it didn't. Not straight away. Everything went quiet again, properly quiet. No knocks, no movement, no shifting shadows, just the rain and the faint hum of wind outside. It almost felt normal. That's what made it worse, because it meant I had time to think, and the more I thought about it, the less any of it made sense. If someone had been in the house, where had they gone? If I'd imagined it, how had I imagined the handprint? I looked at it again from where I sat. The shape was still there on the wall, faint in the low light but unmistakable. Long fingers, narrow palm, that gray, dirty streaking where the water had run down. I stood up slowly, still holding the phone. I started. Don't, Callum said immediately. Don't go looking around, Hannah. Just stay put. I'm not, I said, even though I already had. I'm just checking the wall. I moved closer to it, one careful step at a time. Up close, it looked worse. The lines weren't smooth. They were uneven, broken in places, like whatever had made them hadn't pressed evenly. There were faint ridges where the fingers had dragged slightly, leaving thin trails that caught the light. And the color. It wasn't just ash. There was something darker in it, something that had seeped into the plaster slightly, as though it had been there longer than it should have been. How big is it? Callum asked. What? The mark. How big? I held my hand up beside it, not touching, just comparing. My fingers looked short next to it, stubbier, wrong in a completely different way. Too big, I said quietly. Not like a normal hand. There was another pause. You're sure it's not just, he began. I saw it, I cut in, sharper than I meant to. I saw someone, in the reflection. They were right behind me. I hadn't said that part out loud yet, not properly. Saying it now made it real in a way it hadn't been before. And then? He asked. And then I turned around, and there was nothing there, I said. But it wasn't. Callum, it wasn't like I imagined it. It was there. I know it was there. My voice was starting to shake again. Okay, he said carefully. All right, we'll figure it out. I'm nearly there. I nodded again, though it didn't help, because as much as I wanted to believe that, we'll figure it out, something in the back of my mind was already starting to shift, to reframe things. Because the more I went over it, the more one detail kept bothering me. Not the knocking, not the handprint, not even the reflection. It was the way it had stood, still, facing me, not moving, not reacting until the exact moment I realized it was there. Like it hadn't been trying to hide, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I stepped back from the wall and turned slowly, scanning the room again. Everything looked the same. Everything looked empty. But that feeling hadn't gone completely. It had just settled. Like something that had been moving had decided to stop just for now. Just until I stopped paying attention. I don't think it's a person, I said suddenly. Callum didn't answer straight away. What do you mean? He asked after a second. I hesitated because saying it felt ridiculous. Just if someone was in here, they'd have made noise. I would have heard something. And the door. The door? He said. The pantry, I said. It knocked. From the inside. Another pause, longer this time. Are you sure? Yes. I didn't even hesitate, because that part I knew. I heard it 3 times, then the handle moved. I looked toward the kitchen doorway again. The pantry door was just visible from where I stood, a darker rectangle against the shadows beyond, still closed, still quiet. But now that I knew what to look for, it didn't just look like a door anymore. It looked like something keeping something else in, or out. I'm 2 minutes away, Callum said, and there was something different in his voice now, less casual, less certain. Just stay where you are. I am, I said. But even as I said it, I realized something else, something that made my stomach turn. The knocking had come in 3s. The first time, from the back door. The second time, from the pantry. And now, standing there in the half-dark, listening to the rain and the quiet, I had the awful creeping feeling that there was supposed to be a third. Like something had started and hadn't quite finished. I opened my mouth to say that to Callum, and that's when we both heard it. 3 knocks. Not from the door, not from the pantry, from above us, from the ceiling. Directly over where I was standing, I froze. Callum's voice cut through the phone, sharp now. Hannah, what was that? I couldn't answer, because for the first time since I'd moved into that cottage, I knew exactly where the sound had come from. And I knew, without needing to check, that there was nothing up there, nothing at all, except the empty room behind that warped door on the landing, the one I'd been told not to worry about, the one that, until that moment, I hadn't even thought to open. I didn't want to look up. That's the first thing I remember thinking. Not because I thought I'd see something straight away, but because I didn't want to give whatever it was the satisfaction of knowing I'd heard it. It sounds stupid now, saying it out loud, but in that moment it made perfect sense. Like if I stayed still, if I didn't react, maybe it would stop. But it didn't stop. The silence after those 3 knocks was worse than the sound itself. Han? Callum's voice came through again, sharper now. What was that? Upstairs, I said, barely above a whisper. It's upstairs. There was a beat of silence. That room? He asked. I didn't answer, because I already knew which one he meant. The warped door on the landing. The one Martin had brushed off like it didn't matter. The one I'd somehow managed not to think about until now. I'm outside, Callum said suddenly. I'm pulling up now. Relief hit me so fast it almost made my knees go. Don't, I started, but then stopped. What was I even going to say? Don't come in? That made no sense. I needed him there. I needed someone else to hear it, to see it. I'm coming in, he said. I heard his car door slam through the phone. Then a few seconds later, the sound of footsteps on the gravel outside. I turned toward the front door, my whole body tense. There was a knock, 3 times. I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Hannah, open the door. Callum's voice, clear, normal, right on the other side. But I didn't move. I couldn't, because my eyes had drifted without me meaning them to, back toward the kitchen, toward the hallway, toward the stairs. And for a split second, just a split second, I thought I saw something shift at the top. Not a shape, not a person, just movement. Like something had pulled back out of sight the moment I looked. Hannah? Callum knocked again, louder this time. It's me. I swallowed hard. Say something, I called out, my voice shaking. Say what you said when we were kids. What? He said, confused. Just anything, something only you'd say. There was a pause. Then, with a slight laugh, he said, you used to cry every time we watched Watership Down, even when you were 10. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That's you, I said. I crossed the room quickly and unlatched the door. The second I opened it, the cold air rushed in with him, sharp and wet from the rain. He stepped inside, already looking around, eyes moving from the hallway to the stairs to the kitchen, like he expected something to jump out at him. You look awful, he said, softer now. Thanks, I muttered. He gave a quick, tight smile, then followed my gaze up toward the ceiling. That's where it came from, he asked. Yes. 3 knocks? Yes. He nodded slowly. Right, he said. Let's just check it together. I don't want to, I said immediately. I know, he replied. Neither do I. But if there's someone up there, there's no one up there, I cut in too quickly. He looked at me. Then we proved that, he said. I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to say no, to stay right where I was, to wait it out until morning, but the thought of something being up there, of leaving it unchecked, felt worse. Fine, I said quietly. We moved together. He took the torch from the table, his hand steadier than mine had been, and flicked it on. The beam cut a clean line through the dark as we stepped into the hallway. The stairs loomed ahead, narrow, steep, the kind that creak even when you try not to make a sound. You first, I said. He glanced back at me, raised an eyebrow. You serious? Completely. He huffed out a breath but didn't argue. Stay close, he said, and started up. Each step groaned under his weight. 1, 2, 3. The sound seemed too loud, too obvious. Like we were announcing ourselves. I kept my eyes fixed on the top of the stairs, waiting, expecting something to appear. Nothing did. We reached the landing. The air felt different up there. Colder, still, like it hadn't been disturbed in a long time. There, I whispered, pointing. The warped door. It wasn't fully closed anymore. It stood slightly ajar, just enough to show a thin line of darkness beyond. Callum stopped. Was it open before? He asked. No, I said. It was shut. He nodded once. All right? He stepped forward, slowly, and reached out with his free hand. For a second he hesitated. Then he pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, the sound dragging through the silence like something being pulled. The torchlight slid into the room, and for a moment neither of us spoke. It wasn't a cupboard. Not really. It was too big for that. A narrow room, tucked into the eaves, the ceiling sloping low on either side. The walls were covered in old wallpaper, faded, peeling, patterned with tiny animals that had almost worn away completely. A nursery, or something that had been one. Jesus, Callum muttered. I stepped in beside him, my chest tight. The smell hit me first. Damp, dust, and something else beneath it, faint, metallic. The beam of the torch moved slowly across the space, a small wooden chair in the corner, a low shelf, half collapsed. And then, the basket. It sat near the far wall. A wicker Moses basket, the kind you'd expect to see in a hospital photo from years ago. It looked completely out of place in that room. Too intact, too clean compared to everything else. Dry, perfectly dry, even though the rest of the room was damp. Why is that not wet? I whispered. Callum didn't answer. He took a step closer. So this is what he meant, he said quietly. Just an old room, nothing. The basket moved, just slightly. A small shift, a soft creak of wicker. We both froze. Did you? He started. I saw it, I said. We stood there, staring, waiting. Nothing else happened. Slowly, carefully, Callum leaned forward and lifted the edge of the blanket inside. I didn't want to look, but I did. There was no baby. Of course there wasn't. Just a single object resting at the bottom. A small porcelain rattle, cracked along one side, stained in places. It looked old, too old. Callum picked it up. The moment he did, something shifted in the room. Not physically, not visibly, but the air changed. Like something had just noticed us. What's that on the wall? I said suddenly. He turned the torch. The light caught the plaster beside the basket. At first, it just looked like scratches. But as the beam steadied, the shapes became clearer. Words carved in over and over again, deep in some places, faint in others, layered on top of each other. I stepped closer, my stomach twisting. Don't, I started, then stopped. Because I could read it now, the same sentence, repeated, again and again and again. Don't let her bring it in. I felt a cold rush go through me. Behind us, somewhere in the house, there was a sound, soft, faint, from downstairs, the unmistakable creak of something being moved, slowly, across the floor. Squeak. Callum and I looked at each other. Neither of us spoke, because we both knew exactly what it sounded like. And this time, it wasn't outside the house. It was already inside. We didn't stay in that room. Not for another second. Callum dropped the rattle back into the basket so quickly it made a dull, hollow sound, and we both backed out without taking our eyes off it, like it might move again if we turned away. The scratches on the wall, I couldn't stop seeing them even after the door was shut. That same sentence over and over burned into my head like I'd read it 100 times instead of once. Don't let her bring it in. The sound downstairs came again. Squeak. Closer this time. Go, Callum said quietly. We didn't argue. We went down the stairs faster than we should have. Not quite running, but not careful either. The steps creaked loudly under our feet, the noise echoing in a way that made it feel like the house was bigger than it should have been. The living room came into view, empty. The kitchen beyond it, empty. But the air, God, the air, felt different now. Thicker, like we were no longer alone in it. Where is it? Callum said under his breath. I don't know, I whispered. The squeak didn't come again. That somehow made it worse. We stood there for a few seconds, both listening, both waiting for something else to happen, but nothing did. Just the rain outside, steady and relentless, and that awful heavy quiet pressing in around us. We're not staying here, Callum said finally. I didn't argue. We didn't pack anything, didn't even turn the lights back on. We just grabbed our coats and stepped out into the rain, pulling the door shut behind us harder than necessary, like that might keep whatever was inside from following. The lane was darker than before. The storm had picked up, wind pushing the rain sideways so it stung against my face. Callum's car sat a little way down, headlights off, its shape barely visible through the gloom. We didn't speak until we were inside. The doors shut, the locks clicked. The world narrowed down to the inside of that car. Only then did I realize how hard my hands were shaking. What the hell was that? Callum said, turning to look at me. I shook my head. I don't know, I said. But it's not just the house. What do you mean? That thing upstairs, the basket, the writing. I swallowed. It's not random. Someone knew. Someone wrote that. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. All right, he said. Then we find out what they knew. I stared at him. How? We ask, he said simply. Someone around here has to know what's going on with that place. You said there's a neighbor, right? The older woman? Mrs. Elwood, I said. Then we start there. I hesitated. It was late. Too late, really. The sort of time where knocking on someone's door feels wrong unless it's an emergency. But then I thought about going back inside that cottage, about the sound in the hallway, about the basket. No, I said quietly. We're not waiting. Mrs. Elwood's house was only a short walk down the lane, but in that weather it felt longer. The wind had picked up even more, dragging at our clothes, pushing the rain in sideways sheets that made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Her lights were on. That was the only thing that gave me enough confidence to knock. Callum did it for me. 3 quick raps on the door. For a second, Nothing happened. Then we heard movement inside. Slow, careful footsteps. The door opened just a fraction. Mrs. Elwood peered out at us, her face pale in the light behind her. "Hannah," she said, frowning. "What on earth?" "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I know it's late. We need to ask you something." Her eyes shifted between us. Then, without another word, she opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. "You're both soaked." The warmth hit me the second we stepped inside. Not just from the heating, but from the place itself. It felt lived in, safe in a way the cottage never had. She shut the door behind us and turned the lock. That small sound, the click of it, made something in my chest loosen slightly. "What's happened?" she asked, leading us into the sitting room. I didn't know where to start. Callum glanced at me, then spoke instead. "The cottage," he said. "Something's not right there." She stopped, just stopped. Her hand tightened slightly on the back of the chair she was about to sit in. "I see," she said quietly. That was it. Not confusion, not disbelief, just recognition. "You've heard something," she added. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "And seen something," she said. Again, not a question. "Yes." She sat down slowly. For a moment, she just looked at the floor. Then she let out a long, tired breath. "I was hoping," she said, almost to herself. "I was hoping it had finally settled." Callum frowned. "Settled?" he repeated. She looked up at him. "That lane," she said, her voice low now, careful. "It has moments, quiet for years sometimes, then something stirs it again." I felt a chill run through me. "What do you mean, something?" I asked. She didn't answer straight away. Instead, she stood up again and moved to the small cabinet by the wall. She opened it, took out 3 mugs, and poured tea from a pot that must have already been made. It felt strange, being handed a cup of tea in the middle of all that, but I took it anyway. My hands needed something to hold. She sat back down, and then she looked at me properly. "You've seen the Pram, haven't you?" she said. The room seemed to go very still. I stared at her. "How do you—" "I've lived here a long time," she said. "Long enough to know what comes first." Callum shifted slightly in his seat. "What is it?" he asked. "What's actually happening there?" Mrs. Elwood hesitated. I could see it in her face, the part of her that didn't want to say it out loud, that would rather leave it unsaid and hope it went away again like it had before. But then she looked at me again, and something in my expression must have convinced her. "Her name was Mercy Vale," she said quietly. The name hung in the air. "She lived in the vicarage," Mrs. Elwood continued, "back when it was still standing proper. This was years ago now, 70s, I think, maybe earlier, before my time in the village, but not by much." I leaned forward slightly. "She had a baby?" I asked. Mrs. Elwood shook her head slowly. "That depends who you ask." A silence followed that felt heavier than any answer. "She came here alone," Mrs. Elwood said. "That much everyone agrees on. Not married, not from the village. Already in trouble before she arrived, from what I've heard. She took the vicarage because no one else wanted it. Too big, too cold, too far out." "What happened?" Callum asked. Mrs. Elwood looked down at her hands. "There was a storm," she said. "Much like tonight, the sort that rattles the doors and makes the windows bow. People said they heard shouting, crying. Some said a baby. Some said it was just the wind." I felt my grip tighten on the mug. "And then the house caught fire." She paused. "When they found her," she went on, "she was out in the lane, soaked through, covered in ash, saying someone had taken her child." A knot formed in my stomach. "But there was no child?" I said. "That's the thing," Mrs. Elwood replied. "No one had ever seen one. No midwife had been called, no doctor, nothing. Just her and whatever she claimed she'd lost." The room felt colder again. "She swore there had been a baby," Mrs. Elwood said. "Swore it had been in the house, that something had come for it, that it had copied the sound." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Copied?" Callum repeated. Mrs. Elwood nodded. "John. She said it cried first," she said softly, "before the baby did." No one spoke for a moment. The rain hit the windows harder. "She didn't stay long after that," Mrs. Elwood added. "They took her to the infirmary. She wasn't right after the fire, talking to herself, hearing things. Then one day, she trailed off." "What?" I asked. "She was gone," Mrs. Elwood said. "Just gone." Silence settled over the room again. I stared down at my tea, though I hadn't taken a single sip. Something about it all. It didn't feel finished. "What about the Pram?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Elwood's eyes flicked up to mine. "They never found it," she said. A long pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, not in the house anyway, I felt something cold settle deep in my chest, because in that moment I realized something. The tracks outside my window, the sound in the hallway, the basket upstairs, none of it had felt random. None of it had felt like a memory. It had felt current, like whatever had happened back then hadn't stayed back then at all. And before I could stop myself, I said the one thing that had been building in the back of my mind since we left the cottage. "It's trying to get inside," I said. Mrs. Elwood didn't look surprised. She just nodded once. "Yes," she said quietly. "It always does." I didn't go back to the cottage that night. Callum wouldn't let me, and if I'm honest, I didn't argue very hard. Mrs. Elwood made up the spare room without asking, the sort of quiet, practical kindness that doesn't leave room for refusal. She didn't say much after telling us about Mercy Vale, just moved around the kitchen, tidying things that didn't need tidying, like she was keeping herself occupied so she didn't have to think about what she'd said. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the fire, not the missing child, just that one line. It cried first. I lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm batter the house. Every now and then I'd hear something outside, branches scraping, loose things shifting in the wind, and each time my body would tense automatically, waiting for it to turn into something else. Something deliberate, something like knocking, but nothing came. Eventually, at some point just before dawn, I must have drifted off. The next day should have felt better. It didn't. The storm had eased slightly, though the sky stayed low and gray, like it hadn't quite decided whether to lift. The lane looked washed out, colors muted, everything slick with damp. If anything, it made the place feel more exposed, more real. Callum stayed. He said it casually. "I'll take the day, sort a few things, keep an eye." But I knew he wasn't going anywhere until we had some kind of answer. Mrs. Elwood avoided the subject entirely, which somehow was worse than if she'd kept talking about it. By midday, I couldn't sit still anymore. "I need to see it," I said suddenly. Callum looked up from where he was leaning against the counter. "See what?" "The path," I said. "Behind the cottages, the one that runs up toward the moor." He frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because if it's coming from somewhere," I said, "it's not just the house. It's the lane, the fields, something out there." I didn't know if that was true, but it felt true. And the longer I sat there, the more it felt like I was missing something. Callum hesitated. Then after a second, he nodded. "All right," he said, "we don't split up." "I'm not planning to," I replied. The path started just past the last house, a narrow strip of mud and flattened grass cutting between low stone walls before opening out toward the fields. I'd walked it once before, early in the morning, when everything had seemed harmless. Quiet, but harmless. It didn't feel like that now. Even in daylight, there was something off about it. Too still. The kind of stillness where you notice the absence of things more than the presence. No birds, no distant machinery, no voices carried on the wind. Just that low, constant hush of air moving across open ground. We walked side by side, boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. "Doesn't look like much," Callum muttered. "That's the problem," I said. He gave a small, humorless smile. We kept going. The path curved slightly as it climbed, the cottages dropping out of sight behind us. Ahead, the moor stretched out, dark, uneven, dotted with gorse and heather that had long since lost most of its color. I don't know how long we walked before we heard it. Not long, but long enough that we'd stopped expecting anything. It started faint, so faint I almost missed it. A sound carried on the wind, thin, high, like something struggling to break through the air. I stopped. Callum took another step before noticing. "What?" he asked. "Listen," I said. We both stood still. For a second, there was nothing. Then, there it was again. A cry. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakable. A baby. The sound scraped through me in a way I can't properly explain. It wasn't just the noise itself, it was the way it sat in the air, wrong somehow, like it didn't belong there. Callum's expression shifted immediately. "You hear that?" he said. "Yes." We turned slowly, trying to place it. It didn't seem to come from one direction. It just, everywhere, faint, distant, but close enough to feel. "It could be," he started. "No," I said quickly, because I knew what he was about to say. An animal, a trick of the wind, something explainable. But this wasn't that. It was too precise, too human. The cry came again, longer this time, more desperate. And then, A second cry followed it, almost identical, but not quite. There was a delay, just a fraction, like an echo. Only not. It was too clean, too deliberate, like something was copying the sound instead of reflecting it. Callum's face went pale. "You heard that," he said. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." The two cries overlapped slightly this time. One real, one wrong. The second one had a strange quality to it, flattened, as if it had been pushed through something before reaching us. A recording. That thought hit me all at once. A recording. "Wait," I said. "What?" "I think." I turned, scanning the ground, the bushes, the edges of the path. "I think it's coming from somewhere nearby." We moved off the path slightly, pushing through the low gorse, branches catching at our sleeves. The sound grew clearer, not louder, just more defined, like we were getting closer to its source. "There," Callum said, pointing. Half hidden in a patch of scrub, there was something unnatural against the earth. A shape, rectangular, wrapped in something dark. We approached it slowly. The crying continued, now unmistakable. Two voices, layered. The second one always just a breath behind the first. I crouched down. The object was wrapped in oilcloth, the fabric stiff and weathered but intact enough to keep most of the rain out. My hands hovered over it. "Don't," Callum said. But I was already reaching. I pulled the cloth back. Inside was a cassette recorder. Old, chunky, the kind you'd expect to find in a loft, not out on a moor. The tape was spinning, slowly. Even though, "There's no batteries," Callum said, staring. He was right. The compartment was open, empty, but the machine was running anyway. And the sound, it was coming from the speaker, a baby crying. And underneath it, faint, almost hidden, a woman's voice, sobbing. The sound twisted together in a way that made my skin crawl. Like two things layered on top of each other, not quite in sync. I stared at it, unable to look away. "We need to." Callum started. "Turn it off," I finished. I reached forward. My fingers were inches from the stop button when "Don't pick it up." The voice came from behind us. Calm, quiet, close, too close. I froze. Callum did the same. We both turned. There was no one there. Just the path, the empty stretch of moor. Nothing moving, nothing visible. But I knew we hadn't imagined it. "Did you?" Callum began. "Yes," I said. The recorder clicked softly. The tape continued to spin. The crying didn't stop. And then, footsteps, faint. Behind us, not on the path, in the grass, slow, measured, approaching. I didn't look. I couldn't. Something deep in my gut told me not to. "Walk," Callum said quietly. We stood up, slowly, carefully, and started moving back toward the path. The footsteps continued, matching us, staying just out of sight. The crying followed too, not fading, not getting louder, just staying exactly where it was, like it was tied to us now. I glanced back once. I shouldn't have. There was nothing there. But just for a second, I saw a shadow, tall, thin, standing where we'd just been, watching us leave. I turned away quickly. "Don't run," Callum said under his breath. "I'm not," I whispered, but my chest was tight. My legs felt unsteady, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to get away. We reached the path. The cottages came back into view. The lane, the houses, safety, or something like it. The moment we stepped off the grass, the sound stopped. Just like that. No fading, no trailing off, gone. The silence that followed was almost worse. Callum and I stopped at the same time. Neither of us spoke, because we both knew whatever had been out there had let us go. And that didn't feel like luck. It felt like permission. We didn't talk much on the walk back. Not because we didn't have anything to say. There was too much, if anything, but because neither of us wanted to be the first to say it out loud. That whatever we just heard was real. By the time we reached Mrs. Elwood's house, the silence between us had settled into something heavier than fear. Something closer to acceptance. She opened the door before we even knocked, like she'd been waiting. "You heard it," she said, not asking. I nodded. "There was a tape," I added, "out on the path, playing it." Her face tightened. "They've been found before," she said quietly. "Left out like that." "By who?" Callum asked. She didn't answer straight away. Instead, she stepped aside and let us in, closing the door quickly behind us like she didn't want the air from outside getting in. "No one ever sees who puts them there," she said eventually. "They just appear." That didn't help. If anything, it made everything worse. Callum ran a hand over his face. "Right. So we've got something putting recorders out on the moor, something knocking inside the house, and something that, what, follows people around in the dark?" Mrs. Elwood looked at him. "Not follows," she said. "Then what?" She hesitated. Waits. That word landed harder than anything else she'd said. Waits. I felt that again, the shift in my thinking from before. Not random, not chaotic, deliberate. I need to go back, I said suddenly. Callum turned to me immediately. No. I left everything there, I said. My bag, my things. Stuff doesn't matter, he cut in. It does if I have to stay here longer than a night, I snapped, more sharply than I meant to. And besides, I hesitated, then forced the words out. I need to know if it's still there. He stared at me. You're serious? Yes. There was a long pause. Then reluctantly, I'm not letting you go alone. I wasn't asking you to, I said. We went back just before dusk, not because it felt like a good idea, but because it felt like the last moment where it might still feel normal. If there was any chance of that left. The cottage looked the same from the outside. That was the first thing I noticed. No sign of anything disturbed. No tracks. No Pram. No indication that anything had ever happened there at all. That's good, right? Callum said. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure it was. We approached the door carefully. I unlocked it, and for a second I just stood there with my hand on the handle, not pushing it open. You all right? Callum asked. Yeah, I said. I wasn't. But I opened the door anyway. The smell hit me first. Damp, cold, but also something else now. Something faintly metallic, like old water left too long in a closed space. We stepped inside. The lights were still off from the power cut. Callum flicked the switch. Nothing. Still out, he muttered. He turned the torch on. The beam swept across the hallway. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it. The same, unchanged. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. Because now I knew what the house could look like when something was there, and how easily it could look empty again after. We moved into the living room. My bag was still where I dropped it, my coat, my shoes, everything normal. I'll grab your stuff, Callum said. Wait, I said. He paused. What? Listen. We both stood still. For a moment there was nothing. Then, a faint sound from the kitchen, a soft, uneven movement, like something being shifted, not dragged, not pushed, just adjusted. Callum's jaw tightened. That's not the pipes, he said quietly. No. We moved together, slowly. The torchlight cut across the doorway in the kitchen. The space beyond looked empty. Still. The back door was closed, the counter untouched, the small blue boot still sitting where I'd left it. Nothing out of place, except the chair. It had been tucked under the table before. Now it stood slightly out, just enough to show it had been moved. Did you? Callum started. No. We both knew I hadn't. The silence pressed in around us again. Then, the handle. On the back door, it moved, just slightly, a small, careful turn, like someone testing it from the outside. Callum stepped forward instinctively. No, I said, grabbing his arm. He stopped. Don't, I whispered. The handle turned again, a little further this time, then stopped, and slowly, very slowly, the door began to open. It pushed inward against the latch. Not fully, just enough to create a narrow gap. Beyond it, darkness, no figure, no shape, just the night outside, and the faint sound of rain. Callum took a step closer despite himself. Hello, he called. No answer. He reached out and pushed the door shut, hard. The latch clicked into place. We both stood there, breathing too fast. That was someone, he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. That had to be someone. No, I said quietly, because something else had caught my attention. The glass, in the door. It reflected part of the kitchen, the table, the counter, and, for a split second, something else. I grabbed Callum's sleeve. Don't move, I whispered. What? Just don't. He froze. I stared at the reflection, at the space behind us. And slowly, very slowly, I realized what I was seeing. It wasn't the door being opened from the outside. It wasn't someone trying to get in. It was already inside, standing behind us, holding the handle. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because in the reflection, I could see it clearly now. The same tall, thin shape, the same unnatural stillness. And this time, there was no mistaking it. Its head tilted slightly to one side like it was studying us, learning. And then the handle behind us depressed again from the inside. Callum felt it too. His breath caught. You feel that? He whispered. Yes. We didn't move. We didn't speak. We just stood there, as something that wasn't supposed to be in that house stood between us and the door and waited, not to get in, but to see if we would let it. I don't know how we got out of that kitchen. I remember the feeling, that pressure, like the air had thickened around us, like something had stepped into our space and was just standing there. But the actual movement, the moment we broke away from it, it's blurred. 1 second we were frozen. The next, we were backing out, slowly, step by step, not turning our backs, not giving it that. The handle moved once more behind us, a soft, deliberate click, like fingers tightening and releasing, testing, learning. "Don't react," I whispered, though I don't know if I was telling Callum or myself. He nodded once, barely. We edged into the hallway. The second we crossed the threshold, something changed. Not physically, not visibly, but the presence, that pressure stayed behind, like it had chosen not to follow. Not yet. We didn't wait. We moved straight for the front door, out, into the open air. Neither of us stopped until we were halfway down the lane. Only then did we turn back. The cottage stood exactly as it had before, quiet, still. No sign of anything watching us from the windows. No movement behind the glass. Nothing to prove what had just happened. Callum let out a breath. "That's it," he said. "We're not going back in there again." I nodded, but my eyes had already drifted past the cottage, to the house across the lane. The vicarage. Even in daylight, it looked wrong. The windows boarded, the roof sagging slightly, the front door hanging crooked in its frame. The garden had swallowed most of the path, weeds pushing up through what used to be stone. It didn't look abandoned. It looked left, like something had happened there and no one had ever properly finished dealing with it. "It's coming from there," I said. Callum followed my gaze. "Hen." "No," I said, firmer this time. Everything she said, the fire, the pram, the baby, it started there. "And that means we go inside?" he asked. "Yes." He stared at me like I'd lost it. "That's the worst possible idea." "Then give me a better one," I shot back. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, because there wasn't one. We stood there in the lane, rain easing to a fine mist, the silence settling around us again. Finally, he sighed. "Daylight," he said. "We do it in daylight. We don't stay long. We don't touch anything unless we have to." I nodded. Agreed. We didn't go in straight away. We waited, walked up and down the lane, talked in circles about everything and nothing, put it off. But eventually, there was nothing left to delay it. The sky had lifted slightly, the clouds thinning just enough to let a dull gray light settle over everything. It wasn't bright, but it was better than night. Better than shadows. "Ready?" Callum asked. "No," I said. "Good," he replied. "Me neither." We crossed the lane together. Up close, the vicarage looked worse. The wood around the windows was warped and splintering. The boards nailed across them had shifted over time, leaving narrow gaps like missing teeth. The front garden smelled of damp earth and rot, the kind that sticks in your throat. The door was still hanging open slightly. Not wide, just enough, like it had been left that way on purpose. "After you," Callum muttered. I gave him a look. He pushed the door instead. It creaked loudly as it opened. The sound carried into the house, echoing in a way that made the place feel bigger than it looked from the outside. The air inside was colder, still, thick with dust and something older, burnt wood maybe, or something like it. We stepped in. The floorboards shifted under our weight. The hallway stretched ahead, long and narrow, leading to a staircase that curved upward into shadow. "Don't split up," Callum said. "I won't." We moved slowly. The torchlight cut through the dimness, catching on peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, debris scattered across the floor. It didn't look like a house that had simply been abandoned. It looked like something had been interrupted, left mid-moment, like whoever had been there last hadn't had time to finish whatever they were doing. The kitchen was empty, the sitting room half collapsed. But as we moved further in, something became clear. This wasn't random damage. There were patterns, marks, signs of something being moved, dragged, arranged. "Look at this," Callum said quietly. I followed his light. On the floor just past the base of the stairs, there were faint lines in the dust. 2 narrow tracks, running parallel like wheels. I felt my stomach drop. "They lead upstairs," he added. Of course they did. We stood there for a second. Then, without saying it, we both started toward the stairs. Each step creaked under us as we climbed. The air grew colder the higher we went. Heavier, like we were moving into something, not just through it. At the top, a short landing opened into a corridor. Most of the doors were closed. One wasn't. It stood open at the far end, the same one I'd seen from outside, the room with the window facing the lane, the nursery. We didn't need to say it. We both knew. Callum moved first, The torchlight steadied as he stepped into the doorway, and then he stopped. "Jesus!" he breathed. I stepped in beside him. The room was worse than anything downstairs. Blackened walls, peeling paint, the remains of something that had once been soft, gentle, a child's space. Now it felt wrong, violently wrong. The floor near the fireplace was warped and darkened, the wood split and uneven like it had taken the worst of the fire. And there, half buried in the debris, was the pram, or what was left of it. The frame twisted, the wheels bent, the hood melted down into something unrecognizable. It looked like it had fused with the floor itself. Neither of us moved for a moment. Then Callum stepped forward, carefully. "Don't," I said. "I'm just looking," he replied. He crouched slightly, angling the torch to get a better look. "There's something under it," he said. I felt a cold rush go through me. "What?" "Paper," he said. "Looks like a notebook or something." He reached down, slowly, carefully, and pulled it free. The cover was half burnt, edges blackened, but still intact enough to open. "A journal," he said. My heart started pounding. "Read it," I said. He flipped it open. Most of the pages were damaged, charred, unreadable, but some had survived. He scanned the first few lines, then his expression changed. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer straight away. He just turned the book slightly so I could see. The handwriting was uneven, shaky, rushed. The ink faded in places, but still clear enough. I read the first line aloud without meaning to. "It doesn't cry like a baby." The words felt wrong in my mouth. Callum swallowed. "There's more," he said. He turned the page. "It copies," I read. The air in the room seemed to shift. It listens first, then it copies. I felt a chill spread through me. Another page, another line. It knows the sounds we trust. The torchlight flickered slightly. Voices, crying, knocking. Callum's voice trailed off. Neither of us spoke, because we both understood what we were reading. This wasn't grief. This wasn't madness. This was something else, something that had been there in that house, before the fire. Another page, more desperate now. "It waits at the door." My throat tightened. Callum turned one last page. The writing there was deeper, pressed harder into the paper, as if whoever had written it had been shaking or panicking. "It cannot come in." A pause. Then, "Unless it is carried." The words hung there, heavy, final. Neither of us moved, because suddenly everything made sense. The pram, the knocking, the crying, the way it had stood behind us, not forcing, not chasing, waiting. And then, Callum spoke the one thing I hadn't been able to say out loud. "It needs help," he said. I shook my head slowly. "No," I whispered. "It needs permission." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, the kind that feels like something is listening. And in that moment, I realized something that made my stomach drop. If it couldn't come in on its own, then someone had let it in before. And if it was back now, then it was waiting for someone to do it again. We didn't stay in that room long after that. Not because we wanted to leave, but because something about standing there, reading those words, felt like we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Like we'd gone from guessing to understanding. And whatever it was, it knew we understood now. "Put it back," I said quietly. Callum didn't argue. He slid the journal back beneath the twisted frame of the pram, careful not to disturb anything more than he already had. For a second, his hand lingered there, hovering just above the metal like he'd forgotten what he was doing. Then he pulled it away. "Let's go," he said. We turned toward the door, and that's when I felt it again. That shift, not the same as before. This wasn't pressure. This was awareness, like something had just turned its attention fully toward us. I froze mid-step. "Do you feel that?" I whispered. Callum nodded slowly. "Yeah." We didn't move, because we both knew we weren't alone in that house. Not anymore, not in the way we'd been before. "Don't run," he said quietly. "I'm not planning to," I replied, but my body didn't believe me. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out. Now, we stepped into the hallway. The air felt heavier there, colder. The torchlight seemed weaker somehow, like it wasn't reaching as far as it should. "Just keep moving," Callum said. We started down the corridor. One step, then another. The floor creaked beneath us, too loud, too slow, and then a sound, soft, behind us. I stopped. Callum stopped with me. Neither of us turned around, because we didn't need to. We both knew exactly where it had come from. The nursery. The sound came again, a small, uneven shift. Then a soft, hollow creak, like something rocking. I closed my eyes for a second. "Don't look," I whispered. I wasn't going to, Callum said, but the sound continued. Slow, rhythmic, rock, raws, rock. The same motion we'd seen in the basket upstairs. Only this time, it wasn't subtle, it wasn't small. It was deliberate, louder, as if something inside that room was no longer trying to stay unnoticed. We started moving again, faster now, not running, but not slow either. The stairs came into view, we reached them, and that's when I made the mistake. I looked back, just for a second, just to confirm that nothing was following us. I shouldn't have, because something was standing in the doorway of the nursery, watching us. At first, I thought it was a child, small, still framed by the dark behind it, wearing something light-colored that stood out against the blackened walls. But then it moved, not stepping forward, not shifting its weight, just turning its head. Too far, too smoothly, until it was facing me completely, without its body moving at all. And that's when I saw its face. It wasn't a child's, not properly. The shape was wrong, the proportions just slightly off, the eyes too still, too aware, and the mouth didn't belong on that face at all. It smiled, slowly, deliberately, and when it did, the skin around it stretched in a way that made my stomach turn, because it wasn't forming a new expression, it was remembering one, like it had learned how to smile from watching someone else do it, and then it spoke. Not loud, not clear, but enough. Come back. The voice, God, the voice was wrong, layered, two tones at once, one small, one older, both slightly out of sync, like the crying on the tape. I stumbled back. Go, Callum said sharply. We didn't wait, we ran, down the stairs, through the hallway, out the front door. We didn't stop until we were back in the lane. Only then did I realize I was shaking, properly shaking. Callum grabbed my arm. You saw it, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Yeah, what was it? I swallowed. I thought it was a kid, I said. And I shook my head. It wasn't. We both turned back toward the house. The doorway stood open, empty, nothing visible inside. But I knew it was still there, watching. And then something else hit me. Something I hadn't realized in the moment. The voice, the way it had sounded, not just wrong, familiar. I frowned slightly. What? Callum asked. I've heard that before, I said. He looked at me. Where? I didn't answer straight away because I was trying to place it, trying to separate the layers in my head, the two tones, the child and the other one. And then it clicked, the tape, the crying, the voice underneath it, the one I hadn't fully registered at the time. That woman, I said slowly. Mercy. Callum's expression shifted. You think that was her? I hesitated. I think it was using her. The words felt wrong as soon as I said them, but they also felt true. We stood there for a moment, both staring at the house, and then something moved in the garden. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, a flash of yellow. I turned. There was a child standing near the overgrown hedge, a little girl, wearing a bright yellow coat. Too clean, too bright against everything else. Her back was to us. She was facing the vicarage, completely still. What the? Callum started. Don't, I said quickly. Don't go near her. But even as I said it, I took a step forward, because something about her, something about the way she stood, felt wrong. Not in the same way as before, but close enough. Hey, I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. Are you all right? No response. She didn't move, didn't react, didn't even shift her weight, just stood there, facing the house. I took another step. Where are your parents? I asked. Still nothing. Callum grabbed my arm. Han? I know, I said. I trailed off, because the longer I looked at her, the more something about it didn't make sense. There were no footprints. The ground around her was soft, wet, marked by our own steps. But where she stood, nothing. No impression, no disturbance, like she wasn't touching the ground at all. Don't go any closer, Callum said. Too late. The girl moved, not stepping, not turning normally, just tilting. Her head shifted first, slowly, rotating further than it should have been able to, until her face was angled back toward us, while her body remained facing the house. My stomach dropped. Run, Callum said. But I couldn't move because I could see her face now. And it wasn't a child's face. Not really. The features were too sharp, too defined, the eyes too focused, and the mouth was smiling again, the same wrong smile. And then it changed, the expression. Not gradually, not naturally, just shifted. The smile widened, the eyes softened, the shape of the face altered. For a second, just a second, I saw something else there. An adult face, a woman's, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. And then it snapped back. The girl's form, the yellow coat, the stillness. She turned fully this time, body and all, and took a step toward us. This time, her foot left a mark, in the mud. Callum pulled me back hard. "Move," he said. We did. We backed away quickly, not turning our backs until we reached the road. The girl didn't follow. She stopped at the edge of the garden, just stood there watching, and then, without a sound, she folded, not falling, not running, just collapsed inward like her shape had been removed, and she was gone. The space where she'd stood was empty again. The only proof she'd been there, the single footprint left behind. I stared at it, my chest tight, my head spinning. "What is that?" Callum said. I shook my head slowly. "I don't think it's one thing," I whispered. He looked at me. "What do you mean?" I swallowed. "I think it's whatever it needs to be." The lane fell silent again, the house behind us, the empty garden, the still air. And in that moment, I understood something that made everything worse. It didn't just copy sounds. It didn't just mimic voices. It could take shape, borrow forms, learn how to look like something you trusted, something you'd go to, something you'd help. And that meant it didn't need to force its way in. It just needed someone to let it. We didn't stay on the lane after that. Not near the vicarage, not near the garden, not anywhere it could see us. We walked straight back to Mrs. Elwood's without speaking, the silence between us heavier than anything that had happened. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something else, understanding. And the worst part was, the more we understood, the less control we seemed to have. Mrs. Elwood was waiting again when we got there. She didn't ask questions this time. She just looked at our faces and said, "You saw it properly." I nodded. Callum didn't say anything. "He took shape," I said quietly. "A child, then something else. It changed." Her expression didn't shift, not even slightly. "I told you," she said. "It listens first." I swallowed. "And then it copies," I finished. She nodded once. We stood there for a moment. Then Callum spoke. "What do we do?" That was the first time anyone had asked that properly. Not what it was, not what had happened, but what to do. Mrs. Elwood hesitated. For the first time since we'd met her, she looked unsure. "There used to be ways," she said slowly. "Things people said, old habits, doors kept shut during storms, no answering knocks after dark, never helping strangers on that lane when the weather turns." "That's not a solution," Callum said. "No," she agreed. "It's avoidance." "That's not enough," I said. "No," she repeated quietly. "It never was." The room fell silent again. Then, a voice came from the doorway. "I thought I might find you here." We all turned. Martin stood there, rain dripping from his coat, keys still in his hand. He looked between us, his expression tight. "You've been over there," he said. Not a question, a statement. Callum stepped slightly in front of me. "What's that supposed to mean?" Martin didn't answer straight away. He just looked at me. "You went into the vicarage," he said. I held his gaze. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have done that." Something in his tone, not concern, not anger, something else, something closer to fear. "You knew," I said. He looked away. "That place isn't safe," he muttered. "That's not what I asked," I said, sharper now. His eyes flicked back to mine, and for a second, just a second, I saw it. Guilt, real, unmistakable guilt. "What do you know?" Callum asked. Martin exhaled slowly. "More than I wanted to," he said. "That's not good enough," Callum replied. "If you knew something was wrong with that house." "I didn't know it was still active," Martin snapped, cutting him off. The word hung in the air. Active. Mrs. Elwood closed her eyes briefly. "You should have told her," she said. "I didn't think," he started. "That's the problem," she interrupted. "You didn't think." I felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. "What do you mean still?" I asked quietly. Martin hesitated. "Then, my dad owned that cottage before me," said. I frowned. "So?" "So after the fire," he swallowed. "People went through the vicarage, took what they could, bits of furniture, scrap, anything that looked worth something." I felt my stomach drop. "The Pram," I said. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "You took it," Callum said. "My dad did," Martin corrected. "Not me." "But you knew it was there," I said. His silence confirmed it. "Where is it?" I asked. He hesitated again. "Upstairs," he said quietly. The word hit me like a weight. The locked room, the basket, the rattle, the writing. "You brought it into the house," I said. "I didn't know what it was," he snapped. "It was just an old frame, burnt, worth nothing. We left it up there and forgot about it." "No," Mrs. Elwood said firmly. "You didn't forget. You ignored it." Martin didn't respond, because she was right. "You kept it contained," she went on, "and for a while, it worked." Callum frowned. Contained? The room, she said. Shut, undisturbed, no one touching what was brought in. I felt something shift in my mind. Until me, I said. Mrs. Elwood looked at me. Yes. The word landed heavily. You opened it, she continued. You disturbed it, and the storm. She glanced toward the window. The wind had picked up again. The rain was coming down harder now, more forceful. Storms always wake it, she said quietly. A chill ran through me. Why? Callum asked. She didn't answer straight away. Then, because that's when it started, she said. The room fell silent. I stared at the floor, trying to piece it together. The fire, the crying, the storm, the pram, the copying, the waiting. It doesn't force its way in, I said slowly. No, she replied. It needs to be brought in. Yes, or invited. She nodded. I felt sick, because suddenly everything we'd experienced made sense. The knocking, the crying, the voice at the door, the shape of a child. It wasn't trying to break in. It was trying to be let in. And if it had been brought in once before, then it's already inside, Callum said. No one disagreed. The room felt smaller, colder, like the truth itself had changed something in the air. We leave, Callum said suddenly. Now we get out of the area, tonight. I shook my head. It doesn't work like that. He looked at me. What do you mean? It followed the lane, I said. The house, the path, the garden. It's not fixed in one place. And you know that how? He asked. I hesitated, because I didn't, not completely. But something deep in my gut told me. Running wouldn't end it. It's learning, I said. The word felt wrong, but also right. It's getting closer, I added. A long silence followed. Then Mrs. Elwood spoke. You need to leave the cottage before dark, she said. We already have, Callum replied. No, she said, more firmly now. Properly, doors shut, windows sealed, nothing left open, nothing left to welcome it. The implication sat heavily between us. And if we don't? I asked. She didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, she looked toward the window again. The storm outside had worsened, the sky darkening earlier than it should have, the wind rising. It will come back tonight, she said quietly. My chest tightened. How do you know? She met my eyes, because it always does. The lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied. No one spoke, because we all understood what that meant. The storm wasn't just weather, it was timing, a cycle. And whatever had started all those years ago was starting again. Right now. And this time we were already part of it. We should have left. That's the truth of it. Everything we'd been told, everything we'd seen, pointed to one simple decision. Get in the car, drive out of the village, don't come back until morning. Maybe not even then, but we didn't. And I've gone over that moment more times than I can count, trying to figure out why. Part of it was practical. The storm had already started turning the lanes into rivers, water running thick across the road, pooling in the dips where the ground fell away. Driving out in that would have been risky. But that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was this. It didn't feel like something you could just leave behind. It didn't feel like a place. It felt like something that had noticed you. And once it had, distance didn't seem like protection anymore. So we stayed. Mrs. Elwood insisted we all remain in her house. She moved with a kind of quiet urgency now, drawing the curtains tight, checking the locks twice, then once more for good measure. She even wedged a chair under the handle of the back door, something I hadn't seen anyone do since I was a kid. Just in case, she muttered. Callum didn't argue. Neither did I. The air inside the house felt different now, not just tense, compressed, like everything had been pushed inward. The storm outside grew louder by the minute, wind rattling the windows, rain slamming hard against the glass, the occasional low rumble of thunder rolling across the moor. It should have been comforting in a strange way, a distraction, something natural. But it wasn't, because every sound now felt like it was covering something else, something quieter, something closer. We stayed in the sitting room, lights on, no one venturing far from the others. Callum kept checking his phone, though there was no signal. I sat with my hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched in 10 minutes, staring at the front door without meaning to. Mrs. Elwood sat opposite us, silent now, waiting. That was the word again, waiting. The first knock came just after 9. Soft, almost polite. We all heard it. No one moved. It came from the front door. 3 times even, measured. Callum and I exchanged a glance. Mrs. Elwood didn't look at either of us. Don't, she said quietly. We didn't need telling. No one got up. No one spoke. We just sat there, listening. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself, because we were all waiting for it to come again. And it did. 3 knocks, slightly louder this time, more insistent. Callum shifted in his seat. "Could be someone stuck out there," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "In this?" I asked, gesturing toward the storm. "It happens," he replied. Mrs. Elwood shook her head slowly. "No one comes down that lane in weather like this," she said. The knocks came again. Harder now. Not frantic, still controlled, still deliberate, but no longer gentle. Callum stood up. "I'm just going to check," he said. "No," I said immediately. He looked at me. "We can't just ignore it if it's someone." "It's not someone," I cut in. "How do you know?" "Because I'd heard it before. Because I knew the pattern. Because I just do," I said. He hesitated. Then the voice came from the other side of the door. "Mum?" Everything in me froze. Callum's head snapped toward me. It's not," I said quickly, even as my chest tightened. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Can you let me in?" It was my voice. Exactly. Not close, not similar, perfect. Every tone, every inflection, even the way I slightly flattened certain words. Callum's face went pale. "That's not," he started. "I know," I said, my own voice shaking now. The knock came again, 3 times, right on cue. "Please," the voice said softly. "It's cold out here." I couldn't breathe properly, because it didn't sound wrong. That was the worst part. It sounded like me, like I was the one standing outside, like I was the one asking to be let in. Callum took a step toward the door. "Stop," I said, grabbing his arm. He looked at me. "But what if?" "What if what?" I snapped. "What if I've suddenly managed to be outside and inside at the same time?" He didn't answer, because he knew. The voice shifted, changed, lower, older. A woman's voice now, soft, familiar in a way that made something deep in my chest twist. "Hannah." I felt my stomach drop. No, that wasn't." "It's all right, love," the voice said gently. "Open the door." I shook my head, backing away. "That's not real," I whispered. Callum stared at me. "Who?" I didn't answer, because I couldn't. Because that voice, it sounded like my mom, and she'd been dead for 3 years. The knocking started again, faster now. Not frantic, but more frequent, less patient. "Let me in," the voice said. The tone had changed again, still calm, but thinner now, stretched, like it was struggling to hold the shape. "I just want to come inside." Mrs. Elwood stood up suddenly. "Sit down," she said sharply. Callum froze. I didn't move. "Whatever you hear," she went on, her voice firm now, stronger than I'd heard it before, "you do not answer it." The knocking stopped, just like that. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no rain, nothing. It lasted just long enough to feel wrong. And then, a new sound. From the back of the house, a faint scrape. Then, a slow, uneven creak, like something moving across the floor. Inside. I turned slowly. The hallway stretched into darkness, the back door hidden beyond it. The sound came again, closer. Callum's grip tightened on my arm. "That's not outside," he said. "No," I whispered. It wasn't. The sound moved again, closer still, a dragging motion, a soft squeak, the same one I'd heard before. "The pram." My heart started pounding. "It's already in," I said. Mrs. Elwood didn't look surprised. "No," she said quietly. "It's trying to be." The distinction hit me hard. The sound stopped, right at the edge of the hallway, just out of sight. We all stood there, frozen, staring into the darkness, waiting. And then a voice from the hallway, soft, close, too close. "Hannah." I felt my chest tighten again, but this time I recognized something else. Not just the tone, not just the familiarity, the delay, the slight misalignment, like 2 voices trying to speak at once and failing to sync properly. It stepped forward into the light, or something did. A shape, tall, thin, just visible at the edge of the hallway, not fully formed, not stable, shifting, like it couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. And then it smiled, the same wrong smile, and spoke again. "Let me in." I stared at it, my breath shallow, my mind racing, because the worst part wasn't what it looked like, or what it sounded like. It was the fact that it had stopped knocking. It wasn't asking anymore. It was already inside, and it was just waiting to see if we would let it stay. No one moved, not a step, not a breath louder than it had to be. The thing stood at the edge of the hallway, half in shadow, half caught in the dim light from the sitting room, and for a moment it didn't advance. It just existed, like it was waiting for something, waiting for us. Callum's grip tightened on my arm. "Don't look at it," he whispered. Too late. I already was. Because there was something about it. Something wrong beyond just how it looked. It wasn't stable. That was the word. Its outline kept shifting slightly, like the edges of it weren't fixed. One second it seemed taller, stretched unnaturally, the next smaller, more compact, almost childlike again, like it couldn't decide what shape to hold, or hadn't fully learned yet. The smile stayed though. That didn't change. "Let me in," it said again, the voice layered, child and adult, perfect and broken, familiar and wrong. Mrs. Elwood stepped forward slightly. "Stay where you are," she said, her voice firm but low. The thing's head tilted, not sharply, not suddenly, just slowly, as if it were curious. "You hear it?" she said to us without looking away from it. "Yes," I whispered. "Then don't answer it." Callum frowned. "It's already inside?" "No," she cut in sharper now, not properly. I didn't understand, not yet, but something in her tone, it wasn't fear, it was certainty. The thing shifted again, just slightly, and this time, it stepped forward, one slow step into the room. The air changed instantly, heavier, colder, like something had crossed an invisible line. Callum moved instinctively, placing himself between me and it. "Stop," he said. The word sounded small, pointless. The thing didn't react, it just watched him. And then, it spoke again, only this time not to me. "Callum," his name, perfectly said, exactly in my voice. Callum froze. "What the?" "Don't," I said quickly, "don't respond." But I could see it in his face, that moment, that flicker, that instinctive reaction to hearing your own name spoken by someone you trust, even when you know something's wrong. The thing took another step, closer now, fully in the room. Its shape flickered again, the edges distorting, stretching, correcting. "Callum," it repeated, softer this time, gentler, like it was learning the tone, like it was adjusting. Callum swallowed. "I'm not." The thing smiled wider, and then it changed. Not gradually, not smoothly, just shifted. Its form pulled inward, condensed, smaller. The height dropped, the shape softened, and suddenly it looked like me. Not perfectly, but close enough. Too close. The same height, the same hair, the same posture, even the way I held my shoulders when I was tense. Callum stared. "What?" "It's not me," I said immediately. My voice sounded thin, distant, because I was looking at myself, standing across the room, smiling, and then it spoke, in my voice, perfectly now. No delay, no distortion. "I'm cold," it said. Callum flinched. "I need you to let me in." The words hit differently now, not just a request, a script, a pattern. I felt something click in my mind. "Don't say anything," I whispered. Callum didn't move, didn't respond. The thing's smile faltered, just for a second, then it adjusted. The expression softened, eyes widening slightly, a look I knew well, one I'd used myself. Fear, vulnerability. "Please," it said. The voice cracked, just slightly, convincingly. "I don't want to be out here anymore." Callum's jaw tightened. "You're not." "Callum," I snapped, sharper than I meant to. He stopped. The thing's eyes flicked to me. And for a moment, just a moment, the expression slipped. The softness vanished. The smile returned. Wider now, sharper, more certain. It stepped closer. The floor didn't creak beneath it, didn't shift, like it wasn't carrying weight at all. "You understand," it said, looking directly at me now. Not in my voice, not fully. Something else, layered again. "You've seen it." My chest tightened. It knew, of course it knew. The vicarage, the journal, the tape. "You know what I am," it continued. The words felt wrong, heavy, like they didn't belong in that space. "I don't need to force it." The room felt smaller, the walls closer. "I just need you to let me stay." I shook my head slowly. "No." The word felt stronger than I expected. The thing's smile didn't falter, but something else did. The edges of its form flickered again, more violently this time, like it was losing control of the shape. "You don't understand," it said. The voice shifted again, multiple tones overlapping. "You already did." My stomach dropped. "What?" Callum said. I didn't answer, because I was already thinking it. The room upstairs, the basket, the rattle, the door I'd opened, the thing I'd touched. "You brought it in," the thing said softly. The words hit like a weight. Callum looked at me. "Han?" "I didn't," I started, but I couldn't finish. Because I remembered. The pram, the frame, the objects, the way the room had felt, the way I'd stepped inside without thinking, disturbed it, moved it, opened it. I hadn't carried it, but I'd opened the door, and that had been enough. The thing took another step, closer now, close enough that I could see the details, the way the face wasn't quite right, the way the eyes didn't blink, the way the skin didn't move naturally. "You let me see you," it said. My breath caught, and now I know what to be. Callum stepped forward. "Stay back," he said. The thing ignored him. It was focused on me now, completely. You don't have to be afraid, it said. The tone softened again. Gentle, careful, convincing. I can be whatever you need. I shook my head. No, it tilted its head, the movement sharper this time, less controlled. You don't believe me? No, I said. The smile widened again. And then it changed, not into me, not into a child, something else, a face I hadn't seen in years, a voice I hadn't heard since. Hannah, it said softly. My chest tightened. No, I whispered, but it was too late, because it looked exactly like her now. My mom, not as she'd been at the end, not tired, not weak, but as she'd been before, healthy, smiling, familiar, safe. I've missed you, it said. My vision blurred, my throat tightened. Stop, I said, but it came out weak. Callum stepped in front of me again. It's not her, he said firmly. I knew that. Of course I knew that. But knowing didn't stop the feeling, didn't stop the instinct, didn't stop the pull. The thing stepped closer, just one more step. Open the door, it said. The words were soft, almost loving. Let me in properly. I felt something in my chest shift, a pressure, a pull, like something was trying to align to complete something unfinished. And for just a second, I almost did. I almost said it, the word, the permission, the invitation. But then something broke it, a sound, sharp, loud, real. The back door slammed, hard. The noise echoed through the house. The thing flinched, not physically, but its form, it snapped, distorted. The face flickered, the shape collapsed inward, just for a second, but it was enough. Callum grabbed my arm. Now, he said. We moved, fast, toward the front door. Mrs. Elwood was already there, unlocking it, pulling it open. Out, she said. We didn't hesitate. We ran out into the storm. The wind hit us immediately, cold, sharp, real. Behind us, a sound, not footsteps, not movement, a scream, high, layered, multiple voices at once, not angry, not pained, frustrated, like something had almost gotten what it wanted. We didn't stop running, not until we reached the end of the lane. Only then did we turn back. The house stood behind us, dark, still, silent again. But I knew it hadn't stopped. It had just been interrupted. And that was worse, because now it wouldn't just wait, it would adapt. We couldn't outrun it. That became clear the moment we reached the end of the lane. The storm hadn't eased, it had worsened. The wind tore across the open road, bending trees and dragging rain sideways in thick sheets. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, the world reduced to blurred shapes and shifting shadows. Callum fumbled with his car keys, hands shaking as he unlocked it. Get in, he said. I didn't move. Something felt wrong, not just fear, not just instinct, something deeper. Wait, I said. What? He snapped. Hannah, we need to go. If we leave, I said slowly, it comes with us. The words hung there, heavy, final. Callum stared at me. That's not how this works. You don't know that, I said. Neither of us did. But I could feel it, the way it had watched us, the way it had spoken, the way it had adapted. It wasn't tied to the house anymore, not really. It was tied to us, to me, behind us not loud, but unmistakable. Squeak. Both of us turned. The lane stretched empty, dark, rain-soaked, but the sound came again, closer. Squeak, squeak. The pram. Callum swore under his breath. Get in the car. No, I said. Are you serious? Yes. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Then what do we do? I turned back toward the lane, toward the cottage, toward the vicarage beyond it. We finish it, I said. His expression shifted. That's not a thing you can just say. It started there, I said. The vicarage, the pram, the fire. If there's any way to stop it. It's in the house, he cut in. We just left it there. No, I said quietly. It's not just in the house. The sound came again, closer now. Squeak, squeak. And this time, we saw it at the far end of the lane, the shape emerging slowly through the rain, the outline unmistakable, a pram, moving, on its own, no hands, no figure, just the slow, deliberate motion of it rolling toward us. Callum stepped back. Right, that's not. I know, I said. My heart was hammering now, but something else was there too, a clarity, a terrible, awful clarity. It wasn't hiding anymore, it didn't need to. It had learned enough, it had adapted enough. Now, it was coming. Get in the car, Callum said again. No, I repeated. He grabbed my arm. If we run, it follows, I said. If we ignore it, it waits. If we open the door, it gets in, he finished. Yes. The pram rolled closer, the wheels squeaking louder now, more insistent. Squeak, squeak, squeak. And then it stopped, halfway down the lane, still, waiting. The storm howled around us, but the space between us and it felt quiet, wrongly quiet, like something had been carved out of the noise. This is it, I said. Callum looked at me. What is? It's not trying to trick us anymore, I said. It's asking. He followed my gaze. The pram, still, patient, waiting. For what? He asked. I swallowed. Permission. The word felt final. Callum shook his head. No, we are not. I'm not going to let it in, I said quickly. Then what are you doing? I didn't answer straight away, because the truth was, I wasn't entirely sure. But I knew one thing. It needed something from me. Not just fear, not just attention, something more deliberate, something final. I stepped forward. Hannah, don't. It's me at once, I said. That stopped him. What? It followed me, I said. It copied me. It tried to use me. Whatever this is, it's tied to me now. That doesn't mean you walk toward it. It does if I wanted to stop following us, I said. The pram didn't move, didn't react. It just waited. I took another step. The rain soaked through my coat instantly, cold, sharp, real. Callum didn't follow. Come back, he said. I will, I replied. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I kept walking anyway, step by step, closer. The pram grew clearer, the shape more defined, the frame burnt, warped, just like the one in the vicarage, but whole. Not broken, not fused, intact, waiting. I stopped a few feet away, my breath unsteady, my hands shaking. Up close, it felt wrong, not just unnatural, wrong, like something that shouldn't exist in this state. The hood shifted slightly, a small movement, then a sound, soft, familiar, a baby crying. My chest tightened, not because of the sound, but because of what came for the echo. The second cry, delayed, imperfect, the thing inside it, listening, learning. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them again. No, I said. The word felt stronger this time. The crying didn't stop, but something else did. The movement, the subtle shifting, it stilled, like it was listening. You don't get to come in, I said. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. You don't get to be anything. The air around me felt heavier, colder. The crying changed, not louder, but sharper, more desperate. I took another step, close enough now to touch it. Callum shouted something behind me. I didn't hear it properly, because something else was happening. The sound, it was changing, layering, more voices, more tones. The baby, the woman, my voice, Callum's, all overlapping, all trying to align, all trying to become something clear. Stop, I said. The pram shook, just slightly. The hood lifted, slowly, deliberately, and inside there was nothing. No baby, no form, just darkness, deep, endless. And then it spoke from inside the pram, from the space where something should have been. Then let me out. The voice wasn't layered anymore. It was singular, clear, and completely wrong. I felt something in my chest pull, not physically, but internally, like something was being drawn toward it. Don't, Callum shouted. Too late, I was already leaning forward, already reaching. Not with my hands, but with something else. Something instinctive, something human. The urge to help, to respond, to fix, to answer. I caught myself. At the last second, my hand stopped, inches from the edge. No, I said again. The word came out stronger, louder, final. The air shifted, violently this time. The storm surged, the wind roared, the pram jerked hard, the wheels grinding against the ground, the sound twisted, distorted, the voices overlapping again, breaking apart, failing to hold shape. You were supposed to, it started. The voice fractured. You were supposed to let. I stepped back. No, I repeated. The pram shook again, then collapsed, not falling, not tipping, just folding inward, like the shape had been removed. The frame crumpled, the sound cut off instantly. The lane fell silent. The storm continued, but the space where it had been, empty, gone. I stood there, breathing hard, my mind spinning. Callum reached me seconds later. What the hell just happened, he said. I didn't answer because I didn't know, not fully. But I knew one thing. It hadn't gotten what it wanted. And for the first time since this started, it hadn't been waiting, it had been denied. And that meant it would change again, and next time, it wouldn't ask. The storm passed before morning, not gradually, not gently. It just stopped. One moment the wind was tearing through the lane, rain hammering against every surface like it was trying to force its way inside. The next, silence. The kind of silence that feels unnatural after so much noise. Too complete, too sudden. Callum and I didn't sleep. We stayed at Mrs. Elwood's, sitting in the same room, the lights still on, neither of us willing to be the first to suggest turning them off. No one spoke much. There didn't feel like anything left to say. Whatever had happened out there, whatever I'd done, it hadn't felt like a victory. It had felt like a refusal. And that didn't mean it was over. just that it had been stopped. For now. By morning, the sky had cleared into that dull, washed-out gray you only really get in the countryside after a storm. Everything looked too clean, too still, like something had been wiped away. We went back to the lane just after sunrise. I didn't want to, but I needed to. The cottage stood as it had before, quiet, unchanged, but something about it felt different, not safe, never that, but quieter, less aware. Callum checked the door first, opened it, looked inside. Nothing, he said. We stepped in. The air still smelled damp, still cold, but the heaviness, that pressure that had been sitting in every corner, it wasn't there anymore, or not in the same way. The kitchen was empty, the back door closed, no movement, no sound. The chair by the table sat exactly where it should, nothing out of place. We went upstairs. The door to the spare room was still open, the basket still inside, the rattle resting where Callum had dropped it, the writing on the wall still there. But something about it had changed. The edges of the scratches looked softer now, less sharp, like they'd been worn down, faded. Callum frowned. That wasn't like that before. No, I said. It wasn't. We didn't stay long. There was no reason to. Whatever had been here, it wasn't active, not like it had been. We crossed the lane next to the vicarage. The door still hung open, the inside still ruined. But the air felt empty now. Not hollow, just abandoned. We went upstairs anyway, back to the nursery. The pram frame was still there, twisted, fused to the floor, exactly as before. Callum crouched slightly. The journal, he said. He reached under the frame, sort of pulled it out. The pages crumbled slightly in his hands, more fragile now, more damaged. He opened it. The writing gone, not faded, not smudged, gone. Blank pages, every single one. We stood there in silence, because that shouldn't have been possible. Okay, Callum said slowly. That's not normal. No, I said, but I wasn't surprised. Not really, because whatever had been written there, it wasn't meant to stay. It had been a warning, and we'd already read it. We left the vicarage without another word, back onto the lane. The place looked almost peaceful now, like nothing had ever happened, like it had always been this quiet. Mrs. Elwood stood outside her house when we returned, watching us. You went back, she said. Yes. And I hesitated. Then, it's quiet, I said. She nodded slowly. For now. The words settled heavily. Callum stepped forward. So that's it? He asked. It's gone? She looked at him. And for a moment, I saw something in her expression. Not relief, not quite. Something closer to acceptance. It doesn't go, she said. It just stops. A pause. Until it doesn't. The weight of that sat between us. We didn't argue, because deep down, we both knew that was the truth. I left the village that afternoon, packed what I could, told myself I wouldn't come back. Callum drove me out. Neither of us spoke much during the journey. There didn't feel like a need to. Some things don't get wrapped up neatly. Some things don't end. They just stop. For a while. We reached the main road. The signal came back on my phone. The world felt normal again. Too normal. Like it had nothing to do with what we'd just been through. Callum pulled over briefly. You all right? He asked. I nodded. I think so. A lie, but a necessary one. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Instead, he just said, if anything feels off, call me. I will. I meant that. At least I think I did. That was 3 months ago. I haven't gone back. I don't plan to. But every now and then, something happens. Small things, easy to ignore, easy to explain, if you want to. Like hearing my phone ring when it hasn't, or catching my name being said in a voice I don't recognize. Until I do. Or the worst one, the one I don't talk about, the one that happens late at night, when everything's quiet, when the world feels still, and I'm just on the edge of sleep. That soft sound, faint, distant, but getting closer each time, squeak, pause, squeak. I always tell myself it's nothing, that it's just my mind, just memory, just the way fear lingers. But last night, it was louder, clearer, closer. And for the first time, it didn't stop outside, it stopped just beyond my bedroom door. And then, 3 knocks, soft, even, measured, exactly the same as before. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't answer, because I know now, that's the moment that matters. Not the sound, not the shape, not the voice, just that one decision, to respond or not. The knock came again, 3 times, and then a voice, soft, familiar, learning. Let me in. I kept my eyes closed, my hands still, my breath quiet, and I said nothing, because I know what it's waiting for, and I know if I ever answer it, it won't need to ask again. If this story stirred something within you, Be it a flicker of unease, curiosity, or deep reflection, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think is truly going on? Have you ever experienced a sense of uncanny familiarity like that before? If you have similar stories of your own, don't hesitate to share them. Who knows? Maybe we are all touching upon the same hidden frequency. And if you want to keep exploring these dramatic, mysterious, and multi-layered tales, please hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming chapters. Wishing you a truly peaceful night, where everything is still in the gentlest way, and may there always be a spark of warm light somewhere, waiting for you to find it.